Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and today we're going to look at how my antweights did at MCR in Melbourne over the weekend. So I went over to MCR basically straight off the back of the last ARC meet. There was a couple of days in between, but I had work, and then there was also some other big robot-y type things that kind of preoccupied my time, which meant that I didn't actually get to do a lot of work on my robots. So I took This Is a Party, Downforce, and then also Disguise. Now I took Disguise over, I've kind of stopped using Disguise because the B-League at home is mostly for new drivers, and I don't really like kind of bullying the new drivers per se. But I did have to take Disguise over with me because the mask that Disguise is made of actually came from the arcade where MCR fights. So the last time I was over at MCR, I had the day there beforehand and won myself the mask that then became Disguise. So I thought it was only fitting that we take Disguise and take Disguise back home and fight Disguise in its home, basically. So we did take Disguise over there. Now, MCR being a different robotics league, they work differently to ARC, where ARC have a kind of sectioned round robin, and then how you do in your round robin determines who goes through the finals. MCR just has a guarantee of 3 fights at random for each robot, and then based on points, people then go through to semifinals or just finals, depending on how time plays out. So we're guaranteed 3 fights with each of the 3 robots that we have, so there's going to be a few fights in this video, not quite as many as there was last week though. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into some of those fights. So the first up, we have This Is a Party versus Plasma. Now, those of you who have been around for a little while know that I was supposed to fight Plasma in Antweight Nationals last year. However, Plasma was unable to get themselves back up and running in time and pushed me through, I think, into the finals for Nationals because they were unable to get ready. So it's really good to finally have a chance to actually come up against Plasma. It's a kind of semicircular or something shaped undercutting robot. It's a really cool design. So let's take a look at how this fight goes. Man, oh man, this blade can do some serious damage. Yeah, so that went way better than I was expecting it to go. The fight at Nationals that was skipped, I was quite worried about. So I was kind of a little worried going into this fight, but apparently I didn't need to be. So basically how he lost there at the end, he got hit up and basically landed back down on my blade, which I think either disintegrated a wheel or knocked the wheel completely off. It also broke the chassis in half a little bit and bent the weapon blade. So when he landed, none of his one good wheel was no longer touching the floor because the whole chassis had warped and the blade had warped a little bit. So nothing was quite right or touching the floor. So therefore he got counted out. So yeah, this weapon can dish out the punishment. I am really, really quite lucky that really quite happy, I should say, that I changed over to the good old single tooth design. I was quite skeptical about them for a while. I think I'm not quite so skeptical anymore. Next up, we have a bit of an interesting fight. We have part of the reason I don't run Disguise at home, so it is a Disguise fight, but we are going to fight Disguise versus Rocky's truck. Now, I had to be filled in on what exactly this robot is, but apparently there is a kids' TV show called Paw Patrol, which the kid who is driving Rocky's truck loves to pieces. So they have a robot designed after Rocky's truck, and having now seen the reference images, they've done a pretty good job at getting this thing to be not only a 150-gram combat robot, but also looking like the source material. So I was quite impressed by that. It's also a flipper, which is Disguise's biggest weakness, and driven by a child. So there's a good potential I'm going to lose this one to a child. Let's take a look. Okay, we didn't lose that one, and I think part of that is down to the fact that I actually did upgrade Disguise's wheels before going over. So Disguise used to have some other, different silicone wheels that were kind of rounded over, so they only contacted the ground at a single thin line, which wasn't good for Disguise's pushing power. Disguise's pushing power was pretty terrible. So these are actually the wheels off of A Little Obvious, who is sitting in retirement up here right now, waiting for some parts to come in. And yeah, that change of wheels, just that change of wheels alone has made a marked difference in the amount of pushing power Disguise has. So I was quite surprised by that, and it did actually allow me then to get on the side of Rocky's truck and push them around. I was also quite impressed by the self-riding ability on Rocky's truck. They've got some little bolts sticking out or something, so when they flail the arms around, they kind of kick themselves back over, which worked very well. I was not expecting that. I was kind of thinking that if I got them over sideways, then it would be all over. But no, I've got to say, I'm quite impressed by that design and just how it all kind of works and plays together. And yeah, for a kid driving, they did pretty good. I mean, kids can do pretty well in some of these matches. So you're always going to be careful. Anyway, we're going to move on from Disguise's fight, and we're going to go on to the next destructive fight, and that is Downforce versus Stickers. Now, Stickers is a drum robot that's built by a brand new builder, as far as I can see. And it's got it seems to be a pretty hefty aluminium drum. So this should be interesting. The downforce will hopefully keep us on the ground, but you never know when you're fighting a vertical. That was impressive for a new builder. So Stickers is quite good, as it turns out. It had a lot of energy in that drum. You can see the hits there where it hit the front lip of Disguise and flicked Disguise up, and then the fan pulled me back down again. So the fan is doing good work there and keeping the robot down. However, the wedge is still the old wedge that got destroyed by one of the robots last week's video. That's still the same wedge, so it's all out of sorts, which is why I wasn't getting in underneath him and he was getting in underneath me. So then what happened at the end there was I upgraded the hubs from PLA to ABS so that they would grip the actual motor shafts better. What I forgot is that ABS shrinks around the outside, so the hub didn't fit into the wheel quite as well, and it was a little bit loose, which is why that wheel came off. To rectify this for future fights, I've wrapped some aluminium tape around the actual hub to kind of flesh that out a little bit so the wheel and the hub sit together nicely. But that left me on one wheel. He then got in underneath me and actually managed to disconnect one of the wires connected to the one good motor I had left, so I was dead in the water. But on the whole, not too bad for that fight. Downforce is still very much a work in progress. It's in a badly battered chassis right now, but it's proving that this downforce idea has some merit to it, and I think that's kind of all we're going to hope for here with downforce for the rest of these fights, because like I said, the chassis is pretty battered as it is, so if we get anything more out of downforce than just proving that the fan works, I'm going to be super happy with that. Anyway, that is 3 fights, 1 for each of the robots, so now we're going to cycle it all the way back on round to This Is a Party, and this time round we are versing Free Hugs, which is a rather large robot with some big aluminium claws off the front of it, which are designed to keep robots at bay. And going into this fight, my opponent had actually kind of tweaked those claws to try and push against my front wedges and avoid contact with the weapon. So let's see how this goes. Oh, just the amount of damage this thing can dish out, it blows me away sometimes. So his little arm strategy did keep me at bay for a little while. However, the wedges, the new wedges on This Is a Party kind of rode, like I pushed hard enough that his forks rode up, and then I hit that aluminium. That is actually what started his chassis actually breaking, because he has screws holding that aluminium in, and it started breaking around there. There was a couple of hits on the side as well that kind of like started to separate the top and bottom of his robot, and then that final hit there in that fight actually did separate the top and bottom, and his battery fell out. And of course, once a battery's out, it's an automatic disqualification, because you can't fight with your battery out, and we don't want lipo fires in robots, in combat robots at all. Like that's, even at this size, they would still spit out a fair amount of smoke, and the smoke itself is toxic or carcinogenic or one of those things. It's really, really bad for you is basically what's going on here. So of course we don't want any of those type of things happening. That was a good fight up until that point though. I am very impressed with the damage of the weapon. I was quite impressed with the tactic of trying to keep me at bay. He was a little unlucky that I'd swapped out the wedges. If I had the old wedges on, he would have actually been grabbing the sides of me pretty well, and he wouldn't have slid up, and then the fight could have gone very differently. So these upgrades starting to prove themselves, and I like that. That's good. It's always nice to see some some validation on the upgrades and things that you do. So next up is a Disguise fight. So Disguise is now going to fight Trident, which is like a nice teardrop shaped robot with a big trident in the middle, which means it's another flipper. But also, not only that, because of its teardrop shape, I'm not going to have the same ability to push him around. So I could definitely lose this one. Let's take a look. Yeah, so I did lose that one. That's honestly not that big a surprise. Disguise is very weak to flippers. When he does the thing, this thing, he's done. He's out. I can't get back from there. There is too much weight in the mask itself for me to ever be able to get back from this position. I would need an extra servo with another servo arm, and that's so much weight, it's just not ever going to be a thing. So that was kind of an expected outcome for that fight. Next up, we're going over to Downforce, because it is the only robot in this set of 3 that has not fought yet, and it is going to fight Scream, which is a horizontal robot built by the same guys that built Plasma in the first fight. They actually run the whole MCR, and yeah, they built some interesting looking robots. I love this one just purely for the top plate design. So let's take a look at this. Haha, it didn't break. That is what I was worried about. Obviously, still having that damage from Escobar from the last round, or from the last fight at ARC, I was worried that going up against another horizontal like that meant that I was going to lose that front wedge really quickly and really easily. And thankfully, I think his blade is just a little bit higher, so he was actually hitting good plastic. He wasn't hitting the damaged plastic, which I guess is not good news for him, but it was good news for me. So, I mean, the other good news there is obviously with the downforce in the robot, the ability to push people around is phenomenal. And it got itself a win with that pushing power, so that's kind of unexpected. I was thinking that with the chassis on its last legs like it was just, you know, going to be a bit of fun between other fights. And I was probably going to lose most of the chassis going through, especially against a horizontal spinner like that. I was kind of worried I was just going to get torn to pieces. Thankfully, none of that happened. We did manage to pull off the win, which is quite cool. Yeah, so now we cycle back around to This Is a Party and going into the third of This Is a Party's fights. So far, This Is a Party is sitting on 2 wins, both with some pretty major damage behind them, which good. The robot is working the way I want it to work, and I like that. But now we're going up against a robot that is basically all armor. It's called Pushy. It is a quite thickly printed robot with carbon fiber additions and also a nice big hardened steel bolt out the front, designed basically as a spinner killer. As a spinner, that's a little bit worrying. Let's take a look at how this goes. well, we won that one, but it was kind of disappointing, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the initial early hits that you saw in that fight were interesting because I was making contact with that bolt and not doing too much damage to him, but ricocheting around the arena myself. So yeah, that little prop and lean was kind of disappointing because that fight was an interesting one in terms of I had to change my tactics a little bit, and I would have had to change my tactics more as the fight progressed because continuously hitting that bolt was just actually going to do way more damage to me than it was ever going to do to him. So it would have been nice to see that fight continue on a little bit longer. Looking at his robot, I didn't actually manage to do that much damage to him, which honestly, that's a first for this competition. So kudos to Pushy and the amount of defense that Pushy has. But yeah, like I said, it would have been nice to see that fight continue on just a little bit longer. Anyway, from here we are going to go back to a downforce fight, and this time it is downforce versus 6. Now, 6 is an unapologetic clone of Shrapnel. The guys who built 6 have built a variety of robots. I think 1 through 8 they've got at the moment. And in amongst there, I think they've got 4 or 5 clones of Shrapnel, an earlier version of Shrapnel. They've been making their own small modifications, but the overall shape and design has pretty much stayed stock standard. So, considering that this is basically a clone of Shrapnel and that we've already got damage on that front wedge, this could be a little bit interesting. I've applied some extra aluminium tape for this fight. Let's hope it holds up, hey? Oh man, that was a lot of damage. I've been giving a lot of damage out with this as a party, but this time I've taken a lot of damage. Now I can finally get this guy out, and you can see that, yeah, that front wedge just got chewed. I'm going to throw a photo up on screen here as well of all of the damage that got taken. Yeah, so that front wedge just got annihilated. Some of the sides got annihilated. The wheels got annihilated. I had everything like glued in place on those wheels, and they still got ripped to shreds. The good thing and the interesting thing about that fight, though, is that the internal hubs of these wheels are made out of TPU, which is a 3D printable filament, and it is quite rigid, or it's quite strong and quite impact resistant, but it is terrible at grip, especially the way that these wheels are set up with nothing in them to actually give more grip. But with the fan on, I was actually able to get grip on the bald wheels and was still able to push them around just a little bit. So that is massive for this fan. That is a huge, huge proof of concept, and probably one of the biggest data points that I've got in terms of downforce. However, downforce is in a state after that end of that fight, and obviously not quite as in a state right now. So I did put downforce back together because I knew there was going to be an all-indestructible rumble, and as one final proof of downforce and as one final kind of last hurrah for the chassis, I decided to throw him back together and put downforce in rather than putting This Is a Party into that all-indestructible rumble. However, before we get there, yeah, we have one more fight to go, and that is Disguise. So Disguise is going up against 7, which is done by the same guys as 6. However, it is the non-destructive class, so 7 is actually a flipper robot. And of course, we know what happens when Disguise fights flippers. Some of the time. Let's see if it happens again. Yep, happened again. That's basically what happens when I fight Disguise. So there's a couple of reasons why I don't put Disguise in the arena anymore. 1, big glaring weak spot. 2, normally has to fight against either children or beginners or just people that I don't really want to be beating and I would feel bad about beating. MCR was a bit of a different story. While there were some kids in the non-destructive class, there was also a good portion of adults in the non-destructive class, and people who had non-destructive and destructive bots like myself. So I was a little bit more open to the idea of going into the non-destructive class in MCR. And yeah, like I said, it was good to have Disguise back at home and having a couple of fights. It's got one win, so that's a thing. Yeah. Also, I did forget to mention in the downforce fight, that was actually a draw. The time ran out on that fight. Yeah, so we did pretty well considering that we lost a lot of downforce in that fight. Anyway, now that all of that has happened, they've announced the finals, and This Is a Party is going straight through into the grand finals because by this stage, the clock was ticking on in the evening and we had run out of time. But before we get to that, I do want to do the All-In Rumble, All-Indestructive Rumble. Even though this is out of order, I want to do the All-Indestructive Rumble first and show you how downforce performed, having taken all of that damage, how it goes in the All-Indestructive Rumble. that was pretty good. So obviously I took on stickers quite a lot, trying to get a little bit of payback for the damage that he did earlier on in the evening. That didn't work out all that well. I'm not able to actually damage him, but I was able to kind of push him around a bit and get him to stop his drum and a few bits and pieces like that. The interesting part, and the reason why I wanted to show you this all-indestructible rumble, is there are multiple times in that fight where Downforce is pushing 3 or 4 robots at a time just into the pit. Like, that was really, really good. The amount of traction that I'm getting based on the fan and these silicon wheels is insane. So I really, really do need to do a new version of Downforce. We need to fix the issue with the front wedge getting completely annihilated. We might need to mess with some of the internals and the actual shape of the robot just to kind of bring the weight down a little bit so I can do what I want to do for those front wedges. But it's proving itself, I think. I think the design has potential. I just need to unlock that potential. And yeah, we're on the road to get there, basically. Obviously, you did also then see that I overcorrected and pushed myself in the pit, just over-pushed essentially, and Gecko, the basically fully TPU robot that was kind of spinning up in the corner over there, won the Destructive Rumble. So I probably would have had a shot at winning the Destructive Rumble if I hadn't driven myself into the pit, but, sometimes these type of things happen. Yeah, so that, like I said, is a good proof of concept there. So finally here we have the grand final of MCR, and that is going to be This Is a Party versus Wampa. Now, one quick apology before we get into this fight. I got a bit silly in this fight. I didn't go through my usual door, so I didn't actually turn my camera on correctly. Which means that we don't have footage for this fight from my camera. Instead, one of the people there, well, actually one of Mark's friends, is what I've been told, has given me the following footage. So a huge thanks to him for A, actually filming this fight properly, unlike me, and 2, for letting me use this footage to show you guys how this fight went. So Wampa is our opponent in this, and Wampa is also a vertical spinner, also a green vertical spinner. In actual fact, it's also built by the guys who run MCR. Like I said, really good guys, designed some really interesting robots, and I've been seeing this thing fight all evening, and I really wanted to fight it with This Is a Party because the designs are pretty similar, but he's gone more defensive, and he has a slightly thinner weapon bar than me, so I think it's lighter than mine. So I've kind of gone a little bit more offensive and he's gone a little bit more defensive. So it's going to be an interesting match of styles. Let's take a look at how this goes.
Red flashing warning. Oh, there goes the
Yeah, your battery's hanging out the front. If I hit you, I'm going to hit that. If you want to keep going, I'm happy to keep going. You're going to call that? You sure? Okay. So it might be a little bit unclear from the footage, but that fight ended because I'd done a little bit of damage to the kind of front wall of his robot, and that had kind of loosened the battery inside the chassis. Apparently it's normally quite wedged down in there, and when he turned over, the battery hung out just a little bit and was exposed. One of the spectators saw that first and said something, then I saw it and I was like, well, I could very easily hit that battery. So I told my competitor what I had seen and was like, look, your call, man. I am happy to keep this fight going, and I am happy for you to say, no, that's enough, totally up to you. He had a look at the robot and agreed that the battery was hanging out too far, and so therefore was disqualified from the fight. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a technical loss because your battery gets exposed. But that was a good fight. I quite like that, especially early on. His nice big, I'm not sure if it was titanium or aluminium or steel. I wouldn't say it's steel because that's way too heavy for this weight class. But the actual front wedge was doing a really great job at keeping me at bay. And there was a lot of times where we would go wedge to wedge and I would ramp up, which is actually kind of scary. I'm not sure if he did too much damage to the underside. Yeah, there's a couple of little marks in under here where he's actually cut into me as I've gone up against his wedge. So that was a really good fight, and yeah, his robot I was quite impressed with in actual fact. Like I said, that really low wedge was quite good. The thing that did happen there later in the fight is I did manage to hit that piece. Like I said, I'm not sure if it's aluminium or titanium. I'm gonna say titanium. I think it is titanium. So I managed to hit that titanium, which did loosen it, which meant that it wasn't quite as effective as a wedge from there on out. But then again, old wobbly boy over here is not a great wedge as it goes because he bounces around way too much with the weapon as unbalanced as it is right now. Yeah, so like I said, really good fight, really did enjoy that one. However, what it does mean is that we won MCR. So there we go. This guy is now backing it up. Adelaide and Melbourne, back-to-back weekends. Basically no changes to the chassis in between. Yeah, that is just working way better than anything I've ever built before. I think, like, I can't think of anything that has worked this well. Also, I want to say huge kudos for these trophies. Have a look at this thing. Look at how cool that is. It's a little 3D printed robot carrying a spanner, which is really, really cool. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do really like the ARC trophies. The nice, sleek, acrylic laser cut look is great. But yeah, this guy's quite cool. He kind of reminds me of someone. Getting a little bit of a Strange Young Man vibe going on. But then again, anything that kind of is retro robot-y kind of looks like Strange Young Man, because that's what Strange Young Man was designed to be, just a generic retro robot. But yeah, look at that. How cool is that? Very cool. Yeah, so there you go. I hope you guys have enjoyed that one. So we've got one really good robot, one work in progress robot, and, well, this disguise. I mean, disguise is disguise. There's not much more we can say about him. Yeah, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next video.